gonna see if I can flip camera. Oops, having a hard time seeing it. Here we go. Alright. Alright, here we go. Whenever the wind blows in these trees, they sort of have this way that the leaves move. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's really pretty neat. But it sounds like the trees are talking. And in this case, you can see it as the wind goes through the leaves. Oh, that's a neat looking tree. Alright, well, let me see here. Move this puppy around. We'll do a brief, show you guys the skyline. Here we go. Alright, so I was thinking about life again, and I was thinking about lying, and how in like science fiction movies, oops, what? Oh, you guys found another fruit tree. Fruit trees. So in science fiction movies, the little AI robots, they always have this, they usually have a setting for lying, if it comes up, and usually it's like they'll try to set themselves for 90% truth, 10% lies, something like that. And how, we become such like enforcers, like the hall monitor or something in life, where we're like, holding other people to the standard. We're honest and we're doing things right. And sometimes we forget that if you want to, that lying is necessary. And I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but and I know everybody's thinking of the white lie. Annie, like she's on her deathbed. Oh, you look good, That's not just what I'm talking about here. There's this idea that like Abraham, the Old Testament, Abraham, let me flip this camera around. Hold on. I think. Okay. The patriarch Abraham, the man who started the movement, he lied. He lied. And he lied big, too. I mean, you can excuse the first incident where he lied, but, there was a famine in the land of Canaan. Everybody was going to die from it, and he knew, it was started already, and he went into Egypt. And he took his wife, who's at the time, her name was Sarai. And they traveled into Egypt with their servants and their flocks and, all that they had. And when they got to the boundary of Egypt, Abraham, because that was his name at the time, told Sarai to jump into a box. Because, he had mules and they were he was a rich man. So, he had to inspect all this on the way through. And Sarah, even though she was advanced in years at the time, was still a beautiful woman. So his excuse at the time was, you need to get in this cargo box and hide in it, and I'm going to bribe an official to not have all my stuff checked and get through. And if they find you, tell them that you're my sister. So, lie. Which she was his half-sister. But they were married, so, And so Sarah, well advanced in years, was still a very beautiful woman to the point. I mean, you have to think, the beauty has to be more than skin deep when you're getting in your past your 40s and your 50s and 60s. I mean, she was beautiful up into her being 100. I mean, that's pretty impressive, but at any rate, he says, because if the Egyptians see you, they're going to want to take you and they're going to kill me because I'm your husband so that they can marry you. So make me a promise here that if they do find you, you say that you're my sister. And Sarah, her husband can trust rightly in her. She says, okay, all right, I'm going to say that I'm your sister. And sure enough, as they're going through the cargo boxes, Abraham's gotten to the gates of Egypt. and his flocks and his people are all passing through, and it's kind of like going through inspection, take a peek, make sure you're paying the proper tax on everything, and they let you through. And somehow, they found her. So as they're going through and they're checking all the crates that are being pulled in carts behind the donkeys, I assume, Sarah pops out of a box, and, they don't rape her, they don't accost her, but they do think she's beautiful, so they take her into higher officials, and eventually she gets to Pharaoh, even. And the Pharaoh of Egypt wants to make her, a lesser wife, one of his wives. And she does. Sure enough, she lies for Abraham, and she says, this guy, he's my brother. And if you read the oral Torah on it, the story gets real interesting, because that's not the end of the tale. We have our written Torah, the 5 books of Moses and whatnot. So we have the story in Genesis, but we don't have the oral Torah. So if you're a person who likes to read apocryphal books, then I would definitely suggest you start reading yourself some of the oral Torah. It's fascinating. But as the story goes, Sarah was what we in this day and age would term to be sort of like a witch or a magician. But she wasn't ungodly. She wasn't channeling the dead, But when the Pharaoh would go to, or any man, would go to make a sexual advance on her, she had angels surrounding her that would then go attack the person and make boils instantly begin to break out on their genitals. And apparently she had other powers too, and she was a greater prophet than Abraham. It's a fascinating story, and Sarah really was powerful. We imagine her as this fainting kind of princess, but she was not. Even American Indians do this, rain dances, and Jews also have prayers they say for rain and whatnot. And it's believed that it's the wife, that when they go stand out on the roofs and they pray for rain, or in the Jewish culture, sorry, I'm panting here because I'm walking. It's actually the wife who brings the blessing of the rain. So if somebody asks, there's stories about this, but he asked the husband to go pray. If he knows what he's doing, he'll say, no, you're praying with my wife. And it's because women are considered to be more connected to the earth, more earthy, their soul, because it's closer to the earth, which is an interesting concept that somehow didn't pass into the offshoot religions of Judaism, but is in the original tree, in the original roots. So Sarah had powers. A rain cloud followed her around. Oh, look at that. There is a rabbit. Hold on here. Oops. I went hiding. That was cute. Little rabbit. So, at any rate, so the rain clouds followed Sarah around and would hover over her tent. And, the candles wouldn't go out in her tent and all these things. So Pharaoh understood her value, and, a plague broke forth in his house, and Abraham eventually ended up telling him the truth. But, when Abraham left Egypt, Pharaoh not only gave him all of his people and his property and his wife and everything back, but he gave him riches. He gave him riches and said, please leave and take all this with you. I don't want a curse from that wife of yours. So Abraham lied, and he lied a second time when he didn't really need to like a chieftain, shepherd of a neighboring land that he was passing through. But at any rate, he didn't have to do it then. The same thing happened, by the way, but worse. Nobody in their family, when the next man kidnapped Sarah, really because Abraham, lied and had her lie, nobody in that household could give birth to a baby or have take a dump, it afflicted them severely in that household. Anyway, so Abraham lied, right? And then we've got Abraham's son Isaac. He also lies about Rebecca and tells Rebecca to lie. She lies with him. Then we have Jacob, the son of promise, and he actually gets the birthright as a reward for telling a really good lie, for tricking so well that he convinced his father that he was another son, and enough to get the blessing, to trick him, to trick his father, whose sight was getting dim, to pass it on to him, pass on the birthright, which actually Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of porridge, but later on, but Yaakov still gave him the birthright, but the blessing also he got by pure trickery, and Rebecca helped him. And so he gets he becomes the father of all the tribes of Israel, and he becomes Israel, right? As a reward for telling a really good lie, for tricking. And in each of these instances, though, there's like a purpose, whether we agree with it or not. But there's a reason for their lies, right? And it was partially personal gain. And you can look forward to in Jacob's life, and you can see that when he's splitting the flocks that he worked for with his father-in-law Laban, he even does genetic manipulation on the flocks, because he makes a deal that he's going to get all the goats of a certain pattern of fur, and he puts rods in front of them while they drink from the water and they mate, that makes them the healthy and the strong ones that he chose out of the flock, that he wanted the descendants of, to get this pattern on their fur so that he could take the best of the best of the flock. And he was blessed for that too. It worked out. So, and Laban never could really prove that Jacob had done anything. It's just crazy to think about. But so, all of these lies that they told, though, were not always just to save their own skin, right? I mean, they got benefit from this. It wasn't just survival. Two people. One is Amalek, which is a tribe that chased Israel down when they were traveling through their land, chased them down and hunted them down and killed whichever men, women, children, whoever they could get their hands on, but they did it for no reason. They harassed them without any cause. It wasn't it wasn't to get money. It wasn't for any reason than just to do it. And so it's actually considered a good deed to hate Amalek, which is fascinating. Also Balak. And Balak is the guy who hired Balaam, the sort of like sorcerer prophet, to curse the children of Israel. Once again, Balak had no reason for what he did. It was just a pure act of sin. It wasn't for getting great riches, Balaam, because Balaam's not on that list, and Balaam was trying to curse and destroy the children of Israel for money. So apparently it's the thing that's unforgivable is when you go after someone and there's no reason. There's no reason. You're not getting any gain. You're not getting anything. And you can see that wasn't the case with our the founding fathers of our faith here. It wasn't that they were just trying to hurt someone for no good reason. They actually had gain they could get out of it. So I think that's a important thing to remember when thinking about where lying plays in and doesn't play in life. Tricking is okay, in some instances apparently, contrary to Christian theology. But not just lashing out on someone for spite. I don't know. So it got me thinking, though, too, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were not trying to actually trick their spouse, which is interesting. Or their children. Just their fathers. And strangers. But, there's another thing on that story, too, and that is that it said that Rebecca was right, that she had more of a prophecy than her husband Isaac, apparently. Isaac being the one who was offered on the altar by Abraham. And she knew that Esau would, if he was the one with the birthright, would end up being sort of like, abusive and stuff. That's the other part of that story. That she kind of knew the character of both of her sons and understood the character of Jacob. and the character of Esau, and she saw what kind of leader Esau would be. And it's interesting because the nations of Esau that have descended from Esau, they've never written their own languages. What they're known for is taking over other countries, other great nations, hijacking them and just taking what they have. They don't really develop anything of their own. No philosophy, nothing. No language. They never produced their own language. But so they were brutish, and she understood that. And so, and if you look at the difference between Esau and Jacob too, is that when they met on the road, Esau wanted Jacob to go hunting with him and to take all his wives and his children and all his flocks and little lambs. And Jacob said no. Esau had his flocks and his women and his pregnant women with him because they were nomads while he was hunting. Jacob said, no, I can't do this to the women and children, not even to the little lambs. Can't do this because some of them will die if I ride them that hard. Not doing it. Esau wasn't like that. He was hardcore. And Rebecca saw that, and she actually chose Jacob over Esau. So she made sure Jacob got both the birthright and the blessing. So when it's going to sound funny, but you make up your own what you think is right or wrong about that. Here's another interesting concept. It's believed that the spiritual level on earth used to be higher. And that's why people would see, fairies and pixies and dragons and all this stuff on earth. Okay, this is Jewish. And I tend to believe this, actually. There's a lot of things I already believe, and I find it somewhere else, and this is the case here. Fascinatingly, the urge to worship, because things were so spiritual, because you'd see stuff, right? Like the old stories depict, you'd see stuff. And, I think that's where all these mythologies and stories, the spiritual level was, the earth was on a more spiritual level at that time. And basically, it had to be lifted up so that it wasn't as strong of an influence, because the people were driven to idolatry and human sacrifice because the urge to worship was just so strong. So it got lowered, not just on the side of good, but on the side of evil equally. And now the things that we attribute to science are actually people who are understanding and being able to see how the spiritual world works, but in the laboratory, hands-on, scientifically, which is, I think, accurate. As we call coincidences, quantum physics is very spiritual, for instance, it's fascinating stuff. There's definitely a synchronicity to all of nature. There's something going on that's more, but it's said that the spiritual level couldn't be as intense anymore, couldn't be as strong. And so people could make a decision, a rational one, without being driven. But if you look, and that's where we're at right now, but the belief is that when we're about to go into the next age, when the Messiah is on the scene, which could be plural, by the way, because it does talk about multiplicity, like many people. So when that happens, though, then the spiritual level will begin to get more intense and stronger again. And when that happens, it will happen on the good and the evil. So sightings of bad things, miracles, both good and bad, every side, will become more common. It's fascinating stuff. But if you look at the guy who invented rocket fuel, right? He was a buddy of Aleister Crowley. I know his name, but I can't think of it right now. But he was a warlock, man. Magician, whatever you want to say. And he invented rocket fuel. He made, discoveries for our government. A lot of times, these people, who's another one? Leonardo da Vinci. He believed that he would have to scrub all of his notes before he published any works of all the spiritual concepts that he based it on. All of his discoveries that were scientific. And a lot of it came from, once again, the oral Torah and learning things, you got the Freemasons, they got a hold of Solomon's Temple back in the day, and they took a whole bunch of scrolls and they studied them. And that's what it's what the Freemasons study now. So this stuff is it's intertwined, the scientific and the spiritual. You guys have a good day. Bye.